Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bios and Bookmarks, an online reading series featuring Caribbean authors, proudly powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. As you know, I am Shivani Ramlochan, and I'm extremely excited to be joined today by Amanda Alcántara. Amanda, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Hi Shivani, and hi to everyone who's joining us via Facebook. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
You are extremely welcome. Now, for all of you joining us from all over the world, I want to tell you just a little bit about Amanda's extraordinary debut book, which is a hybrid collection of poetry, short fiction, and some memoir writing. It's called Chula, and Amanda published it herself. And when I first read Chula last year, I was struck by how powerfully and passionately Amanda brings her own experiences to the fore of what it means to be a Dominicana, what it means to be living and wielding a hybrid existence with passion, con fuego. And I have often said that I feel like our Anglophone representation of Caribbean literatures needs to be more expansive, more generous, to reflect the rich array of diversity, culture, and tongues spoken. And Spanish is absolutely at the heart of that. So, Amanda, thank you again for being here. And without further ado, I am sure all of you are as excited as I am to hear Amanda read from Chula, so I will now invite her to do that. Amanda, the floor is yours.
Yay! Thank you so much for that, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. When I first heard about Bocas last year, it was because the literary festival invited me to submit to their award contest, and I was honored that I was invited to submit my book because to me this is a very Caribbean experience. My experience is Caribbean, and I'm just very excited to be here today and to be joining this community. So yeah, let's get started. A lot of Spanglish. There's a lot of Spanglish in the book, so now you know. Nunca seré fina, pero tampoco soy sencilla, bailando reggaetón desde niña, liberación en las marquesinas. I'm a Libra, catch me en la esquina, spreading flyers, handing out ideas, dudes trying to look back at it like I'm Trina, lip gloss popping, call me Leodita. La revolución va a estar encendida, fuego en la cintura y fuego en la oligarquía. Soy puta pero picky, call me fresita, sepo más rico que el postre de su marida, los pongo en cuclilla a comer de gratis, así le lleno la barriga. Now you can call me Mother Teresa. But for real though, let me step back and let me reintroduce myself. Yo soy Amanda Alcántara con acento en la A, la palabrista, la que se hacía llamar radical latina, la que confunden de niña teniendo de reina la pinta, la que se inventa frases porque vive entre dos lenguas y 5 vidas, hija, hermana, puta, santa y amiga, y bésame la mano que también soy tu madrina. La que se ve buena aunque no corre ni una milla, that bitch you hate because you assume she's problematic, but she's still about freedom, más que Frida, yo soy de la sal autocrítica. Tú te crees woke, pero sigues a las masas, yo sigo la vida. I'm the spirit to your sprite, the electricity para tus pilas, the one that hits you a escondidas. Y cuando se va, se siente. Emotional diva, unconventional lyricista, underestimated leader. Watching me walk away es un privilegio para tus ojos y un deseo para tu boquita. Me prefieren muerta porque mi boca es muy grande para sus ideas vendidas. Pero esta rosa no se marchita, como mi margarita. Y te lo repito por si se te olvida. Nunca seré fina, pero tampoco soy sencilla. Bum bum baby, bum bum your roller coaster, swing swing baby, I'll never let you go. When I came to the US, I tried to learn games other kids played here. This is a song I tried to learn. Today, I still can't remember the whole thing. In the end, it didn't matter if I learned the whole thing. I always returned to the DR before the end of the summer, and I prefer the Dominican songs anyway, like Pollito Playby, Yo Tengo un Novio, and others like it. In school, I always used to brag about the summer I spent in the US. I showed off my language skills during English lessons and would always compare the two countries. The US has clean bathrooms, not like here. I was kind of obnoxious. Yo no me hubiera aguantado a mí misma en el colegio. Like, I wouldn't have liked myself in school. Pero cuando me preguntaban cuál país me gustaba más, siempre decía la República Dominicana, específicamente Santiago. Aprendí de los adultos que el tráfico de la capital es insoportable, and even though I had never been, I used to mimic everything my mom did. So if she liked the US more, she liked Santiago more, then I preferred the Santiago more as well. A mí no me gusta la capital, demasiada gente, I would say. And in the DR, I had all my friends. Mom had a car, which we didn't have in the US, and I could play outside in the medio de la calle, in la Fernando Valerio, or in el Ensueños, or in the places where my friends lived, and just run out of the way when cars came. One time, I almost got hit by a car, which stopped right as its front hood was by my tiny stomach. Another time, I actually did get hit while riding a bike. We were visiting an aunt of mine que tenía una casa y un patio grandísimo. I always liked visiting her house, but only for the backyard. Everything inside was so clean, it didn't feel like a space for me. The older kids who usually played with my sister were teaching me how to ride the bike. I was 6 and I already knew how to ride a bike, but this one had plastic decorations all over it to make it look like a motorcycle, even though you still had to pedal. It all happened so fast. When I was finally riding it, I reached an intersection and una jipeta, a jeep, was coming towards me. All I had to do was stop, but the frenos were too far for my little fingers to reach. I heard my sister scream, "Dale pa' atrás, dale pa' atrás!" Apparently, you could also pedal backwards to brake, but I didn't react fast enough. And as the car hit me from the left side, someone yelled, "Ay, la mató!" I don't remember much from there, except waking up in my tia's pristine kitchen with everyone around me. My mom pressing something wet on my head. My sister was crying. Later, mommy would tell me the driver was there too, having a panic attack. Ella está bien, I heard someone say as I woke up. The bike was so big, the Jeep barely touched me. Now, we just laugh at the whole thing. Good times. Mommy told me rooms are sacred and to not let anybody in. So I stay out of cemeteries because that's where the dead sleep and I'm trying to live. I don't mess with dark energies, my life is lit. My skin is golden, my land is rich. Se hacen rico vendiendo el país y a nosotros no nos dejan ni un chin. But our spirits still persist. We got joy in our hips and a smile on our lips. Vestido de verde, we resist. We keep our pride, hold on tight, abundant, never dry. In the desert, we survive with the water that's inside. Gushing, I can make you feel alive. Let me show you what it's like. I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I don't lie. Our people never die. We were the first to inhabit the earth. You wish you were this fine. Roses in the concrete, we deserve better, so we fight. Make us think we're poor, but Mother Nature knows the truth. Diablo, mami, todo eso tuyo. Yes, the whole world is mine. Santiago, June 17, 2006. 15 years old, 3 months before leaving to the US. Dear Diary, I decided to lose my virginity with Henry. I mean, life doesn't make any sense anyway. I mean, since about 3 months ago, I've noticed that. And if love makes me happy, why wait? Besides, I'm going to use protection. And I feel like being free, so I don't care about morals. What morals? I mean, I'm going to suffer anyway, because that is what life is about. And I might as well suffer for something good. I feel like escaping, just like in the song Quiero Escapar or something, de Kudai. And I was crying like hell yesterday afternoon. So I let it all out. And now I know what I want and not what other people want. Oh, and I'm going to Amaprosan pool today. Mom thinks I'm going with Patricia, but it's not true. I'm going with Henry. Yeah, I think that's it for part 1.
Thank you so much for that Amanda.
Thank you. Thank
Uh,
you.
I mean, hearing you read directly from the book it feels like a revelation on top of the experience I've already had. And there's a way in which, particularly hearing you wield the Spanglish with so much confidence and so much alegría, it brings me back to that very real notion that we started off by discussing, that the Caribbean and Caribbean writing is so much more than one language, one identity. Even like the most respected literatures of our region often overlook, to their detriment, I think, books that are written in other tongues. So I want to begin with discussing the Spanglish. I completely loved it. I think I have the advantage of speaking Spanish. And so for me, it was a full immersion. But I think even if I didn't come to Chula with that awareness, I would so appreciate the lack of apology that you bring to the table for using Spanglish. So I'd love us to talk about that. How important as a choice did that feel for you in bringing this book to life?
Yeah, that's always one of the first questions that I get, and it's crazy because when I was writing it, I did realize that by writing it in both languages, like unapologetically, and it's not necessarily bilingual because you need to know both almost to fully experience the book.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I would be excluding a lot of people. I would be excluding people who only speak English and who only speak Spanish. But to me, it was very important because it reflects the the hybrid experience that those of us who are from Dominican Republic, who moved to the US, or who have relatives in the US, it represents that experience. And it's an experience a lot of us have. So, migration from Dominican Republic to the US, it's huge. It's been huge since it started in the early 1900s, but
Mm-hmm.
it's been huge since the 60s and 70s, and we can get into like political reasons for that. But basically, people go to the US chasing better economic opportunities. And, a lot of people go to the US escaping poverty or escaping, at some point, political persecution. And to me, it was really important to keep it in both languages because it was true to my own experience. It was true to what I know is the experience of a lot of people. And honestly, it's also beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful and it's rich. And I think we see this all over the Caribbean with the different kinds of English, and sometimes it's like Haitian Creole, right, which is a mix of French and some African languages. We see this all over the Caribbean, and this is just like one iteration of that. The Spanish and English. And then I love it because it's also Dominican Spanish, which is also very specific. So it's not like a Spanish from Spain. It's a kind of Spanish that is also influenced by different cultures. It's influenced by the enslaved people that were brought to the Americas. It's influenced by the colonizer language, Spanish, right, which was imposed on us. And it's almost like we made it our own. And I've traveled across the Caribbean. I have been to Trinidad,
Yay!
and yeah. And to me, it always takes some time to adjust to the local English, right, or the local Spanish. But it's beautiful to witness it as well.
I love that you say that because in recent times, even speaking about some of the Trinidadian writers who have received more arguable success in the mainstream, one thing that you will see the Metropolis award holders praise Trinidadian writers for is their use of the demotic, the idea that by using our own dialect, our own dialects, that somehow makes it something rare and singular and new. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
always confused by that because it assumes that these tongues have been new to the space and nothing could be further from the truth. I think that's something that Chula proves as well. At no point in the book did I feel like you were about to say, I'm about to speak in these ways. Here are the reasons why. Like the book completely somersaults that expectation, right? It takes us into the heart of the language, this beating, bleeding, often heartbroken existence. And I feel that you can only do that from a place of relentless honesty. So I'd like to talk
Yeah.
about honesty a little bit in the book, because so much of this book feels close to the bone, close to your bones. And it's so hard to distinguish what is 100% fiction from 100% fact. And I try to move away from that even as a question. But how important did it feel to you in putting the book together to stay close to a kind of truth?
Yeah. This book is based on my life, so it's not, I wouldn't say it's fiction, but I do like the word imaginative because of the poetic elements, even in the poetry and even in the what do you call it? Even in the prose and even in the essays. Like there's something about poetry that makes you describe things in a very beautiful and a very sort of magical way. So I use the word imaginative for that reason, because there's some things that I say in the poems that are not quite literal, but they're felt, and I feel them. To me, this book was really a healing journey. When people ask me when I started writing it, I always say at 7 years old, because the earliest piece in the book was a journal entry that I wrote when I was 7 years old. And it became a way of honoring that younger version of me. So the last piece that I read about, Dear Diary and losing my virginity, right, which is, that was also verbatim how I wrote it in my journal entry at the time. So it felt like a way of honoring my younger self, and also who I've become. And to me, it's a celebration of that. And I think in honoring my own story, I was also honoring that of other Afro-Dominican women like me, other Caribbean women like me, and keeping it real. I mean, keeping it real. There's some, and it's interesting, what you brought up about in Trinidad, and what the writing in the local language is like there. It's interesting because one of the books where I disclose, one of the essays where I disclose, sexual assault, I wrote it in English and in third person. And I wrote it in a very essay-like, almost academic English. And it's because that was a way of coping. And I don't really think that essay even fits in the style of the book, but I kept it there because it was honest that I needed to write it in that way in order to say, hey, this happened. And this might give you context to the rest of the book and what I'm trying to talk about here, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. I had similar thoughts to what you're saying when encountering that passage and other scenes from the book. It almost felt like you were imposing some distance. So not a huge forbidding distance, but just enough structural distance to be able to say, here is something I need to speak about, and it's not going to be easy to talk about it. It's my reality, it's my lived experience, and this is the form I can present it in. And even so, that recounting of childhood sexual assault before the point in time where the child knows that the assault is taking place, or to call it that, is such a fraught thing to bring to the table. And with Chula, the book, I feel that we get so much that is brought to the table about your history, your time spent both in the DR and in the US, what those places can both simultaneously give and not give, and then the judgments from both sets of people and places depending on where you are and how to navigate that. So my next question is about navigation, about navigating. You navigate genres in this book. You give us poetry, you give us essayist forms, you give us prose forms, you give us photography, as well as navigating the expectations of other people around the book. So anything you want to think about?
Yeah. To me, when I think of the book as a whole, I actually like to think of it almost as like an album, in that instead of reflecting a sort of linear narrative, it's more about speaking of an emotion and speaking of, this is the feeling that I want you to get from this quote unquote album. And when you purchase, I'm thinking now like 1990s, but when you listen to an album, you know, it doesn't surprise you if one song is one genre and the next song is another genre. But I think with books, we are surprised when that happens. And to me, because of how important it was to include different genres, but also to include different languages and to be unapologetic in that way, that's actually why I decided to publish it independently. I felt that as a writer, as a young writer, as a newcomer to the literary world, I knew it was going to take a lot of time and a lot of convincing to try to bring this to a literary house, to a publishing house, and say this is worthy of being published in this way. You know, I didn't want them to make it monolingual or, you know, English with a little bit of Spanglish, right? Or I didn't want them to make it just one genre. So I think of it that way. I think of it as an album and as an emotion. And it's interesting because it does feel, the word that's coming to mind is disruptive, but I want to say, you know, it does feel like inventive to do it, and experimental, that's the word. It does feel very, you know, it's very experimental, but a lot of writers write different genres. So I also don't think it's necessarily something new or something that people should shy away from. And it makes me wonder, why is it that, you know, we have to like box ourselves when writing a book into different styles, you know? Yeah, and again, you know, I am going to go back to the analogy or the metaphor of it being like an album, because even when it came to putting it together and putting it out, even when it came to coming up with the title, it felt like I was leaning on this emotion. And it's this emotion of, you know, Chula, it means, the direct translation to English, like the closest I could find, is baby girl. You know, where sometimes you could say it to your friend and it can be beautiful and loving, but if you hear it from some guy in the street, it's not gonna feel so beautiful and loving, you know? So, and I feel like Chula represents that. It represents different facets, and it's a word that has different meaning, that it can be loving, but it can also be commodifying and sexualizing. And I wanted, and that's what the book is, and that's what the book encompasses. Like it's complex, but to me it's about that femininity.
There's so many things I want to talk about. I'm gonna have to restrain myself and put my thoughts in order, because I'm getting excited by this conversation. So first, before I forget, I love that you bring the analogy of the album to the table, because, you know, the first poemas that I encountered in Chula made me want to almost hear them sung and rapped and performed in that way. And that, again, is so unapologetic. This idea that not only do we have the form of the poem, which a lot of writers can understand in a very formal, very refined, elegant sort of way, Chula is also troubling that idea of what a poem can be on the page. And you bring that musicality, you bring el fuego, you bring the passion to the space of the poem that so makes me want to hear it sung out loud. So I guess my question is, can we get an album? I would love that.
Oh my God, I can't believe I'm being asked that. You know, I do write some of the poems to a beat. I feel like it helps to sort of have some more rhythm. Mm-hmm. It helps me with coming up with the words. You know, and I might mess around and put something out, you know, but it would be more fun. I don't think it would be serious. I don't think I have the proper voice, you know, but you know, and it's not necessarily something I want to do, but I want to do seriously in terms of like, ooh, I want to be a rapper, you know.
Yeah.
But it is something that I definitely have thought about experimenting with, and it's a lot of fun. So why not? And to me, when I think of poetry and slam poetry, mm-hmm. and being in New York, that is where it comes from. Like that is where performing poetry and like slam poetry or spoken word, that's its home, right? And that's its roots. It's in hip hop. It's in, you know, New Yorican, right? So like Puerto Rican, New York experience. which is very much tied to the birth of hip hop here in New York.
And this is like exactly what you said about the book subverting the idea that the kind of Spanish you're going to get is one kind of Spanish. I feel like this is a good example. The poems that almost feel like rap, that you're going to get a kind of Spanish that is not directly from Spain. It's not Spanish you would find all the time in a textbook, and that there is great power and great agency in claiming the hybridization of that language and saying, look, absolutely, it deserves to be on the page. Why not?
Mm.
And this is where I come from.
Yeah, exactly. No, and thank you for saying that. And to me, it's very important to reflect that and to honor that as well. And it mirrors the experience of Caribbean people in New York City. Like it's a truth.
Absolutely. I feel like I am monopolizing the conversation because while we've been talking, there have been people in the chat box on Facebook who have a lot to say. And I think no better way to start than by sharing with you a comment from our boss at the NGC Bocas Lit Fest, Marina Solandi Brown, who says, "Fenomenal oír el Caribe del Norte y del Sur en tal conversación. Thank you." Oh, and I so agree with her. And we have
Gracias.
Fernandez Campa, who says, "So excited for the conversation. I love Chula. Saludos from London."
Yay! Shout out to London.
Fontanelle says, "There's real joy in the reading of those lines." I think Maria is talking about your reading from earlier. And I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah, and to me, it was very important to have a lot of joy. And when you write, like, if I'm writing the way Dominicans speak, the way we speak, it's gonna be joyful because that's what we do. Like, that's Caribbean languages. That's what it's about.
It's true. I think sometimes because of how much reading I do for work of Caribbean literature in all the genres, I will admit, it's something I can take for granted. Like the sheer irrepressible joy of our language and our languages. And that's something that distinguishes us, something for which and in which I think we deserve to be proud. So thank you for reminding me of that.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a lot of fun. And I'm seeing behind you, you have the Stay Lit sign. And I just want to give a shout out to our entire like African diaspora, right? Because Stay Lit, that's like a African American saying. And in Spanish, we have an expression like that too in Dominican Spanish, which is encendido, right? Like, which means like it almost means like on fire. Mm-hmm. But it's crazy because it actually means lit. That's like the best. And I just realized the title Chula, the translation is also very like what is AAVE, like African American vernacular. Like Chula, the translation is baby girl, which is also like, so I think we're connected in this way too, and the joy of our language.
Well, I'm so excited to be talking to you, Amanda, because these are synergies that instinctively exist across the Caribbean and the Caribbean diaspora. And it takes this kind of sharing, this kind of forum for us to see there have always been so many more things in the literature and the culture that connect us than divide us. And for me, it's something powerful to reflect on. So thank you for that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you too for bringing that up and for making these connections. Like you're also, I feel like I'm also learning a lot right now, like while talking to you, and it's making me rethink a lot of my intentions too with the book.
That's an honor to hear. And there are parts in Chula that the book as a document for radical joy and for outside of the binary thinking about ways to express sexuality and freedom is so rich. And there are also parts within that are so heavy to hold. There is the entire section about the cousin's husband that felt so chilling. I think all the more so because while reading it that this is real, and the way that you describe the the systemic and persistent fear and paranoia that you/the speaker felt. It hit home on so many levels, not least of which because this is something that Trinidadian women and women across the Caribbean deal with every single day. So, how much did you feel like you were writing not only as a representation of your experience, but as a way to reflect on something so many Caribbean women face when you were writing that?
Yeah, I think to me, writing it, it became about acknowledging that I experienced that as well. Because, I mean, this is a big issue. Violence against women is a big issue. In Dominican Republic specifically, like femicidios, right? The women that are killed for being women or by romantic partners, it's huge. It's a huge issue. And, you know, not even, and even more so for marginalized communities like within womanhood, right? So like trans women are also killed in Dominican Republic for being trans. And when I think of that essay, it became about speaking my truth as well and acknowledging that I did have an experience of violence against me. Like even though it wasn't physical, it was still visceral, and it made me hide. It made me move. It made me go to the police because I didn't feel like I had another recourse, and it showed me how difficult it is to get support as women as we're going through that. And it was very hard. It was very hard for me to write it. It was very hard for me to navigate also writing about how the women around me reacted to that in a way that didn't turn them into villains, right? Like, you know, quote unquote, for literary reasons, right? I'm using the word villains, but that instead did it in a way where it spoke to their truth as well, right? So a woman telling me, oh, it's normal that happens to you, like don't make such a big deal, that's not her being dismissive. That's her telling me something about her own experience and how we've been taught to deal when these things come up. Like there's lack of community support. Initially, you're completely disregarded, you're completely invalidated, you're told you're crazy, you're told this is not that deep. And it's really sad. It's really sad, quite frankly.
I mean, reading the account of trying to get some kind of help and the dismissiveness and the bureaucracy of La Policía, it hit home in such an intense and visceral way because, I mean, Trinidad's history, Trinidad's contemporary lived reality is not immune, far from it, to this kind of violence. And in the papers, you will see accounts of women who are in their own way disappeared, women who are violently mutilated, women who are killed. And what I find particularly heartbreaking, not to allocate tiers of meaning to the violence, of course, but to add and amplify to this relationship we have with violence against women, is the violence that is specifically meted out to Venezuelan immigrant women in Trinidad. And one witnesses the sheer visceral xenophobia that becomes a part of that conversation, and the decisions that are made mostly by men, mostly supported by women, about what a Venezuelan woman's life is worth compared to a Trinidadian's. And that,
yeah. No, it's you know, and this is what I mean by, like, you know, as women we face these issues, but then within the experience of being women, there's marginalized women within that, right? So in the Dominican Republic, I would say that's true of Haitian women and Haitian immigrants in the Dominican Republic, or Dominicans of Haitian descent, where your life is deemed as unworthy. And we need to change that. We need to change that, and we need to be real about what that is, and how, in the end of the day, our experiences as women, they connect us, you know, and they try to rank our value based on nationality, based on looks, based on race, and it's messed up. I don't know what else to say except that it's messed up, and it makes me feel very like impotente. Like it makes me feel like there's so there's not a lot you can do about it. You know, right now in Dominican Republic, we're waging a fight, and I say we as someone from the diaspora, because we do have a role here as Dominican women here as well, to put pressure on the government there. But, you know, we're fighting for access to abortion just for 3 cases, right? If a woman is raped, if the fetus is not viable, and if the woman's life is in danger, like health, you know? So that's, Dominican Republic is one of the few countries in the region that doesn't allow rape, that doesn't allow abortion, not even in those conditions. And we're also fighting to make child marriage illegal, because it's still legal if you have the consent of the parents, which is crazy. It's crazy to me, you know? So yeah, so this is, now we're bringing like girls in the picture, and young girls, and the violence that young girls face. And it's sad. And I wanted to reflect that in the book. And it wasn't like, when I wrote that essay, it wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm gonna write this because, you know, let's end sexual assault against women and I have to make a statement. Like, I wrote it because it was my experience. That's it. Like, it wasn't like a huge agenda around, let me show how difficult this is. It was more about taking it out of me, and in that way, hopefully moving on for myself from that experience, while knowing there's really no moving on, because we're still navigating being women in a patriarchal society.
Amanda, this is where I have to say that your book does something extraordinary. Like, even in the space of this particular essay that we're discussing, you create so much compassion for the other woman in the narrative, for the cousin herself. You explicitly say there's no reason to blame her or to villainize her. And your essay, in the midst of your own trauma, your own affair, is making room for these diverse and often complicated stories of other women. And you do that across Chula, the book, with the stories of your sister and of your mother and of the matrilineality of your family. And that's a kind of generosity that I find rare in literatures. And so I pay attention to it when I see it, and definitely I see it here. It's a radical gesture that moves through the entire book for me.
Thank you. And yeah, and it was very hard, because, you know, how much of other people's stories are our stories, right? Like, I don't own the stories of the women around me, even if they impact me, even if some of them are reacting to me in my own life. But it felt very important for me to do that, because I wanted to humanize these women. And something that a lot of people ask me is, you know, what was their reaction to the book? And, you know, we have this culture of silence, right? You don't talk about this. You don't talk about, you know, the bad things that happen in the family. Like, this is private. So I think initially that they didn't say it, but initially they definitely were ambivalent. And my cousin read the book, and she was like, the person is not my cousin. I changed that relationship for her own safety.
Yes.
But, you know, she said people are gonna know who it is. I'm like, you know, so I know she read it, but the book actually brought me closer to the women in my family. And I realized that it's because to them, in that moment, especially like when I read the book for the book release a year ago, I wasn't just, you know, their daughter, their cousin, their niece, their sister. They were also experiencing the book as listeners, and as witnesses, as women themselves, you know, not just as, oh my God, she's writing about me, but as, let me listen to what she's saying. And I think sometimes we don't take, you know, when we have difficult, complex relationships with our families, I think sometimes we don't take into consideration that these are people who live and breathe and who experience your work as well, and who also experience literature too. So even if this is something that, you know, I'm not sitting down with my mom talking about feminism or talking about what book are you reading this week, but it doesn't mean that they can't have that experience as well, and that this isn't something that you're sharing with them.
Absolutely. And to everyone who is joining us, if you're just tuning in, don't worry, we still have good bit more to go. Welcome again to Bios and Bookmarks, powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. I am speaking with Amanda Alcántara. We are having a wonderful conversation. Sadly, I don't want to end, but in the interest of time, I want to ask you, Amanda. So you may have seen that the Bocas Lit Fest has been working on a project also powered by NGC, called 100 Caribbean Books That Made Us. Now, when we devised this project, it was a way to respond to a BBC article that presented 100 books that shaped our world, of which there were only 4 or 5 Caribbean titles. So we began our campaign in response, not as a competition, but as a way to ask what Caribbean books shaped you, which books of poetry, nonfiction, fiction, or a combination thereof, like Chula, have helped shape your world as Caribbean people. So now I want to put that question to you.
Yeah. To me, I was definitely impacted by this book. The name is kind of interesting. It's called Yola York. Let me say it in Spanish. Why am I saying it in English? Yola York, Dominican York. And it's this book by Josefina Baez, which is an account of people who live in a building, presumably in Washington Heights. So, but it's documenting the experience of the people in this building, and it's being told in a way that is so experimental and yet so fluid and so unapologetically Spanglish, bilingual, and it's incredible. It's an incredible book. It's definitely a ride. And when it comes to Josefina Baez, all of her work it's a ride. Like you're just joining the ride, and yet you still you connect to it in a way that makes sense, even if the work is very experimental, and at times it also doesn't feel like linear. It's about a feeling, and it's about language. It's playful and it's joyful too. And I would recommend everybody to read her work. And another book that I really, really love and that really impacted me, it's La Mucama de Omikunle by Rita Indiana, which was translated to English. The English title is Tentacles.
I love that book. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a great book. And, to me, it's sci-fi based in the Caribbean. And it's a book that, it bends a lot of ideas that we have about Caribbean. So it's like gender bending, it's magical, and it's crazy to me that I hadn't read other sci-fi Dominican work before until that book, because once you read it, it almost makes sense. Like it makes so much sense to have a magical story come out of this island, to have a story that looks at environmentalism and that looks at time travel. And it's just a very, very rich story. So I would recommend everyone to read that as well. And, for me, for my next book, which will be a novel, and it will be more, yes, I'm trying to go to a publishing house. I'm doing it big, I'm going all out. The next book, I will wait my 2 years to get published. It is going to be sci-fi, and it's and futuristic too. And I'm very excited for that, and to continue reading other sci-fi Caribbean futuristic work.
Oh, I love that you say that, because one main arm of the Bocas 2020, the festival that's coming up in just a couple of weeks, is the future, the future of the Caribbean, and the fact that the Caribbean has always been a futuristic place. So for those of you who don't know, the 10th NGC Bocas Lit Fest is September 18th to 20th, and the program is all fully available on our website. And of course, the entire festival is virtual because of the times in which we live. And so absolutely, please, everyone is welcome to come check it out. And I hope that we see many of you in the virtual seats. And I love that Tentacle is one of your picks, Amanda, because in a lot of ways, it's doing the kind of work that Chula is doing. It's pushing hard against the limits of the possible, the limits that we've been told and taught and educated to put on our literatures and say, this is the way. you tell a coming-of-age story. No, this is the way you tell a gender-based story, and to which you and Rita are saying, well, actually, no. These are the ways that I'm going to go about this business, make it entirely and singularly my own, and you'll just have to deal with it. And you know what? It's going to be phenomenal. And in both cases, it was.
Oh my God, I feel humbled that you're saying that. Thank you. I love Rita Indiana, so I'm like, woof. But thank you for saying that. You know, and to me, I think, I mean, we're just gonna keep doing it. That's it. You just gotta keep writing and don't shy away from writing how it is that it comes to you. Like it's Caribbean. This is who we are. Mm-hmm. We, like you said, I love that you describe Caribbean as futuristic place. It is, and it's a birthplace too of a lot of ideas, a lot of creativity, of the new world, right? Like the quote unquote the Americas and all of that. Like it's, yeah. So your work should be reflective of that and of you.
Absolutely.
I mean, I shouldn't, not that I'm trying to tell people how to do, you know, what they should be doing, but you know what I mean? Like it's, if you're true to the Caribbean experience, like these are themes that are going to come out.
And they just will. And the choice, I think, then lies in the hands of the writer, deciding what they want to do with that. And so everyone who's joining us from all around the world, thank you again for being here. Don't feel shy to leave your questions, your burning questions for Amanda, as I'm about to invite her to go into her second reading. So Amanda, again, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Oof. All right, so for this second part, I wanted to read something from the introduction and take it from there. All right. This book is an attempt to rescue my own history, that history and other histories. It's an attempt to rescue the parts of myself that I've hidden, stored away in boxes under my bed, and an attempt to revisit the life I left behind in the privacy of my journal pages. It's an attempt to share and make sense of the parts of me that aren't hidden, that are inevitably obvious in my face, in my voice, and in my skin. And above all, it's a reivindicación, a reclaiming de quien soy y la niña y adolescente que una vez fui. So it's a reclaiming of me and the girl and the adolescent that I once was. They took me there with my barely there. They took me with my barely there scar. The EMT guy reminded me of this other guy I liked in college who wouldn't look at me twice, a popular on-campus athlete. We were just talking, regular stuff. How can a pretty girl like you be sad? What are you sad about? Do you have a boyfriend? He got my number. We flirted. He dropped me off at the hospital, helped me get signed in, and left. He put a colorful bata on me. Apparently, I needed to wear this one and not the regular one, because this one signified I couldn't leave at will. They asked if I wanted to see anyone, alert anyone, ask for any emergency names. I gave them none. A sweet nurse came by later and asked again. I gave them none. Excuse me, I'm just gonna drink some water. Chula, la foto mía de niña con el pelo amarrado para atrás with the little butterfly clips we all wore at one point. Very 90s. I began using this photo in presentations when I started taking performance seriously. Es que me veo tan chula en esa foto. I was a beautiful child with soft eyes and a lot of energy. I wrote my first poem when I was 9, and around that time, the photo was taken. So much love since I was little. Chula, I find myself in you today, mi niña chula y cariñosa, belleza. You are so worthy of warmth, of love, and you are enough, and you are whole. And Chula, it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. Be gentle with yourself. And I do hold myself. and I spend more time at home, and I drink more water, and I've been learning how to twerk properly, and how to cook for me, and how to do the loud bird whistle with my hands so that if I'm ever lost again, I can find my way home. Chula as fuck, chulería en pote, chuleándome a mí misma, la más chula, chula. How amazing is it to give ourselves butterflies? Call me Matitina, escandalosa desde niña, la más chula y la más linda. De adulta, una conscious gentle diva. Tú te creerás Dios, pero yo por hombre no me pongo de rodilla. Si la más puta soy la más fina. Travel the world with red lipstick, international caperucita. Qué bellos mis ojos y grande mi sonrisa. Speak in 3 tongues, parcel mouth boquita. Si te pica, es mi mariquita. Esta es mi dicha. Vendiendo country club y ganando la partida. Santiago meets the world en mis pupilas. I'm a pupil, maestra y la enseñanza misma. Escribiendo desde chiquita, I'm gonna have to put this on Genius porque está caliente la tinta. Y dirán que soy privona, pero esta es mi vida y la vivo como una tigra. Y este cuerpo es mi casa, y aquí Amanda es la que manda, y esta es mi real patria. A ella le canto himnos, mi bandera, mi cara, mi nutrición, la lavanda. Riquezas por dentro, ellos quieren robarla, mis ancestros me aguardan. Y no me digas mamacita hasta que sea madrecita. Soy bonita y te gano en Jeopardy porque soy lista. Radio Bemba de noticias, escuchando música y de cuentista, antillana y caribeñista, vendiendo empanadas dita, autonomía bendita. Con mis hermanas estoy activa y para lo que venga, guía siempre lista. Mírala, qué linda viene, mírala, qué linda va, con su vestidito corto y la nalguita para atrás. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Amanda. I feel like I invoked the desire to hear some singing, and somehow I got it. So I feel like I am the fortunate one here. Thank you so much for that reading, which gives so much. The first longer reading you did for us had its own kind of rootedness, and so too does this one. And for those of you in the audience who've been with us from the beginning, this is proof positive that Chula is a very deceptively small book on the outside, but it contains multitudes, the multitudes of Amanda, the multitudes of the experiences that she's writing from. And I love that the book gives us space to unpack what Chula is, what Chula means, and if Chula were an embodiment of a person, what would that person be? And I feel like one gift you give the reader is to present all the things it can mean without saying, this is what it should mean to you. The book is so open in that way. It gives us so many possibilities to see ourselves through the lens of you and also make our own conclusions. Did it feel like this open-ended of a process when you were writing it?
Yes, actually, I haven't thought of that question, but yes, I mean, it had to because I knew it was, because I knew that it wasn't a regular sort of novel or like one essay, but that instead it was going to have different components and it was going to be playful and go back and forth. I absolutely knew that it was going to be very open-ended and that it was going to, that everyone was going to have a different experience with it. And it was something very scary to do. It was very scary to do because I wasn't sure if that was going to be well received, if people were going to understand it beyond the language part, right? If people were going to make sense of it. And in the end, I think, you know, whether it's about liking it or not, I am grateful for the reception that it's had, and I'm grateful for everything that you said. I feel so honored here. I feel like I'm like in a cloud and I need to be brought down. You know, it's like, okay, stay rooted, stay grounded. No, but seriously, thank you for everything that you've said, and I definitely knew it was going to be open-ended. Yeah.
That's lovely. And we have a couple questions from the audience. We have a question from Marta Fernandez, who I was hoping would chime in. Marta is a great friend of Bocas. Marta asks, I was wondering, how was the process of writing the book? Like, using the notebook journal as inspiration and also part of the writing. The relationship between the various voices and memories in all genres and languages is so powerful. And it seems that the journal plays a big part in that. And then she says, Mil gracias por la conversación.
Yeah. Oof. I've been writing since I was a kid, and I always knew that I wanted to write a book, but I never actually sat down and did it until I came up with sort of the concept of Chula, and I realized that the reason I hadn't sat down and written a book is because I had this expectation of what a book is. I had an expectation that, you know, it had to be like the books that I grew up reading. And for me, putting this book together was a realization that what I was writing was enough and that it was worth publishing. And when it came to the journals, it's interesting because I wanted to honor my younger self in also respecting her privacy. I don't know if that makes sense. So basically, when I was writing as a 15-year-old, when I was writing as a 7-year-old, when I was writing as a 10-year-old in journals, my journal was my best friend and it was my secret keeper. It wasn't something that I expected to be published. You know, and one thing that's coming to mind that's crazy is the diary of Anne Frank. Mm-hmm. They knew that she, or they had the assumption when it was found that she would want others to read it because she changed the names within it, you know? When I was, and not to equate myself to that, but it, you know, just thinking of like other journal writing and other diary writing, when I was writing in my journal, I was not expecting to publish it. So to me, it definitely was a moment of like, okay, well, I'm also not going to publish everything in it. And I also made sure to include some creative writing from that time when I was 15, 16. Even if I cringe when I read it now, it's my younger self. And I wanted to publish. So there's one piece that I published from that time that it was about that. It was about, you know what, this is my negotiation with my inner child. If I am going to publish some of these journal pages, don't worry, I got you, because I'm also going to publish what you did expect to be published and what you did write as a creative writer. So it felt like a lot of conversations with myself too.
I love that. It's such an honoring of the self across mediums, across ages, across genres. That's beautiful. Thank you for that answer. And I can't believe it's already almost time to wrap up. I feel we've been just chatting and learning so much. But as our Bios and Bookmarks family knows, we like to wrap things up with a little game called Three Envelopes. So as you all know, the rules are very simple. You invite Amanda to pick an envelope from 1 through 3, and we engage with the question or reflection that's inside. So Amanda, 1, 2, or 3?
2.
Oh, here we go. Inside envelope number 2. And these questions are prepared by our brilliant social media assistant, Alana Marie. So Alana Marie, thank you for these.
Thank you, Alana.
If you could change 2020 by removing or adding one thing, how would you edit this special story?
Woof. I feel like the obvious answer is to not have a pandemic. but because that's a given, I'm going to try to think of something else. So I feel like that's obviously, I want everybody to know, if I could remove it, I will. If I could, you know, just get rid of this pandemic, I will. But, you know, one thing that I would change, right? Is that the question from 2020?
Yes.
I guess it would be the response response to the pandemic. I think, I think our governments have failed us tremendously. And, I live in the US where everything is supposed to be, we have this idea that everything is like under control, and that if a pandemic happens, it'll be handled. If a hurricane happens, it'll be handled. If any sort of natural disaster happens, it'll be handled. And yet I feel like we are shown time and time again how this government doesn't care about its people. And with this pandemic, we have seen how the healthcare system has failed us tremendously. I want to say globally, but I'm going to focus in the US, like in this country. So to me, I would change our I would probably do this any other year, but I would change our political leaders and our response, and make sure that people use this as an opportunity to recognize the power of community, and that we really are all we got. Like, your neighbor, that's your person. So go talk to them.
I love that. And, to add to what you've said, I feel like in these dangerous times, it behooves us all to read as dangerously as we can, to read radically, to read imaginatively, to read subversively. And Bios and Bookmarks family, that's why you have to go and read Chula right now. If you don't have it, get it directly from Amanda's website. So we'll put the link to Amanda's site in the comments. Go there and you'll see a bunch of affiliate links taking you to places where you can buy Chula. It's a book that is for these times. I mean, the book did not anticipate a pandemic, but it is saying so much about how to live and to express yourself authentically, despite what people tell you, despite how you're taught to think and feel. So Amanda, I want to thank you so much for this powerful and moving work. And I can't wait to see your novel. That's exciting to learn. I didn't know that.
Yeah, thank you. And, thank you so much to you, Shivani, and to Bocas Literary Festival for having me. Thank you to everybody who's joined on social media. I hope this video is archived so everybody can go back and check it out, and come back and check it out. And yeah, I'm just grateful this is the year where you say it. I'm grateful to be alive, and I'm grateful to be here and to be writing, and to be part of this Caribbean writers literature community.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you to all of you all over the world. Please stay safe. Please be well wherever you are, and tune in to Bocas 2020, our upcoming festival. Thank you so much, and take care.